Believe me, you're the only one who cares.
Hey guys, gals, and everyone between, MangaKamen here, trying something new with the holiday season. While I do like animation and I've talked about things tangentially related to it, I wouldn't consider myself a cartoon reviewer of sorts. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I don't like cartoons or talking about them, but I've never been one for slotting myself into one community or another. Same thing with talking about cartoons or animation. I've never been a huge fan of talking about individual episodes of shows or even movies. I used to do it, but it really wasn't my thing. When I talk about the latest episode of the current thing when people can honestly go online and see it for themselves, I've slowly become more accustomed to talking about the series overall or making shorts on the matter and analyzing moments of the shows. I could easily divide my content and go back to talk about individual episodes of stuff like Helva Boss, Scott Pilgrim, or Castlevania Nocturne, but again, I don't like doing that since a lot of my criticisms also have to go overall with the series in those regard. I'm saying this because I'm actually going against that notion since I do want to talk about a particular series and a specific episode, and that's Batman Beyond. God, this show's opening was so trippy. To give a brief overview, Batman Beyond is a sequel series to the iconic Batman animated series, done in a similar style but set in a more futuristic Gotham City, with Bruce Wayne now being an old man who can't exactly go around gallivanting in spandex anymore, and a new Batman taking his place, Terry McGinnis. I enjoyed the show quite a bit. I don't know if it was because it gave a possible future vibe, or because I related more to Terry himself, but I found myself more of a fan of this show than the original. Not that the original was bad, mind you, but this just stuck out more to me. And we're going to explain why with this episode, Meltdown. It's the 5th episode in the overall series, but it's probably one of my favorites. So we begin at the docks with Batman analyzing the water. Turns out there's been illegal transport of toxic waste, and it just so happens that there's another transfer happening tonight. Batman, Guardian of the Earth. Ah, it's good to be bad. Damn, Batman Beyond's got that whole Metal Gear Solid 4 full body camo technique going on. Probably another reason why I like this show. A whole on technologically advanced Batman makes a hell of a lot of sense, especially with the gadgets that Bruce used to make to combat enemies. Although I think Bruce is beginning to lose a few screws since there's a major design flaw. You can see the belt buckle and the cloaking ability. Naturally, as the drop happens, Batman stops them. And one thing I have to give credit for is that the show actually allows the audience to fill in the blanks. Before the fight started, Batman, while cloaked, took one of the loading hooks and we see him jumping down. The next time we see that same hook, it's attached to the escaping truck and ripping its axle out. The audience is able to put 2 and 2 together without having to actually show it happening. We don't need to have every scene animated for this stuff to make sense. If we know event A happened and we saw event C happen, we can come to the conclusion that event B was there as well. To point out, this is for smaller moments like these, and not for big plot elements that get shoved into a text message. Speaking of phones, Batman finds one on the leading goon. Okay, I know the animation is a little stilted, but it really works well here. Batman be all like, "Bah, bitch!" Turns out the phone has a number of Derek Powers, the man who had Terry's father killed.
Powers.
Amazing the numbers people put on their speed dial.
My God, I'm talking to Batman. I think this is probably one of the reasons why I like Terry over Bruce when it comes to Batman. And that's because Terry's a bit more immature and willing to sling some cutting words when it comes to these sorts of things.
You got a supercomputer and can't find this guy?
I'm 80 years old, asshole.
Sorry, I forgot computers aren't your thing.
Good, now shut up.
I know that I've railed on the past with heroes making snark, especially when it comes to some stuff from the Marvels, but there are a few reasons why it works with Terry. For one, he's still a teenager at this point in time, and teens tend to be snarky assholes, and it makes sense. And 2, he's not always spouting this kind of thing off and has a good balance of maturity to him. After taunting Powers, the current CEO of Wayne Enterprises' skin begins to crack, and we learn his body's radiation levels are going off the chart.
What do I pay you people for?
Yeah, a little context here. You know that one mulable clip that some people like to use for their videos?
Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
Yeah, Powers is the character in that. He's the villain that'll be known as Blight, and in an earlier episode, thanks to Batman's actions, Powers was infected by a toxic gas that he created himself, and it would have killed him, but thanks to radiation treatments, the toxin was removed, but unfortunately, Powers became a walking nightlight in the process. Back to this episode, a new scientist comes up to Powers, Dr. Lake, offering a solution, essentially cloning Powers a new body and transferring his consciousness into said new body. I can test it first on someone who certainly doesn't have a history of villainy and certainly doesn't have a tendency of revenge.
You have someone in mind. I've been like this for nearly 50 years, and I haven't aged one day. I have become what many men have dreamed of, an immortal.
Mr. Freeze, probably one of the more empathetic villains in Batman's roster, especially thanks to the original animated series. Yeah, this is the same Mr. Freeze from that series prior, and it's really taking a lot not to make a few head jokes here. I will talk about continuity in a little, but for now, Mr. Freeze takes the opportunity to getting a new body, and wouldn't you know it, it actually works.
Cold. It feels cold.
Of course, with Victor Freeze being brought back to the limelight, not everyone is happy about that.
I don't trust him.
Powers or freeze?
Neither.
So we get a short segment of Terry shadowing Freeze, even seeing him save a cat from getting hit by a monorail.
Yeah, there's a menace to society.
We're then shown probably one of my favorite scenes in this episode, when Freeze is brought to his own grave, where his former head was placed into it.
It symbolizes the end of a life, and the beginning of a new one.
Of course, this moment gets contrasted with Freeze being attacked by an unnamed assassin, who turns out to be one of his former victims in the past, having frozen his family. And supposedly they didn't make it considering that he was willing to kill Freeze.
No. I've done this man enough damage. No words can express my sorrow for the pain I've caused you. I beg your forgiveness. It was another life, though that's hardly an excuse. I can only promise you this. I will do the best I can to make reparations to you and everyone I've ever hurt.
And this is why I used to really love superhero stories, and in particular this episode right here. You need to consider Mr. Freeze's past in this. Most people, especially in the context of the story, are not familiar with the tragedy of Mr. Freeze. How his goal, before he was turned into the well-known criminal, was a simple scientist trying to save his wife Nora. And why should they be? To them, Mr. Freeze is a monster, someone who would and could freeze people to their cold deaths. But is it right? One of his biggest factors into Mr. Freeze's motivations, especially after his wife Nora was cured, was due to his condition.
I want to live like this, abandoned and alone. A prisoner in a world you can see but never touch. Old and infirm as you are, I'd trade 1,000 of my frozen years for your worst day.
It even got to the point where Mr. Freeze's body had actually started to deteriorate, and he was only able to save his head. His bodiless existence is the impetus for him not having contacted Nora, and why he sought to wreak havoc on any and all those around him.
Ironic, isn't it? After all I did to keep my wife whole, I end up like this. You understand now why I could not return to my Nora, my treasure. There's no hope for me.
It was his condition that had drawn him into a more cold and wrathful state. I say this because of his new body, you had to effectively taken away the one thing that prompted Freeze into becoming a nihilistic monster who was willing to freeze the world alongside him. But that doesn't erase his crimes or his sins. Even though Freeze does consider this to be a new beginning for himself, he can't escape from his past, and he knows this.
No words can express my sorrow for the pain I've caused you. I beg your forgiveness. It was another life, though that's hardly an excuse.
Really show regret for your actions in the past, especially for a villain, showing that while they are willing to continue their new beginning, they still can't run away from their actions when they committed them, and rather they do what they can in order to compensate what they did. But like he said, that's hardly an excuse, and he can never bring back those lives he snuffed out. For a kid's cartoon, Batman Beyond did tackle a lot of heavy subjects, and the thing is, it was neatly tied into the plots of the episode. You had episodes that focus on things such as drug use, revenge, animal cruelty, and many other aspects. I'm honestly surprised the show wasn't talked about more. But back to this episode, it poses the question of a person like Freeze is actually worth any sort of second chance of life. And it's even demonstrated between Bruce and Terry.
More like blood money.
Come on, can't you cut him a little slack? Like my mom said, he's just a guy trying to put his house in order.
It's a cold draft that blows through that house.
And this is where I get more into the continuity aspect. The last time in the series continuity that we saw Mr. Freeze was when he had gone out of his way to attack Bruce Wayne Manor, intent on destroying Bruce's found family at the time, and even coming close to killing Alfred. It should be noted that Bruce did offer to help Freeze like he did with Nora, but Freeze just backhanded Bruce in his offer. It's not hard to imagine that an older, more jaded Batman, after years of dealing with endless crime, would hold this position, especially since the last encounter with Freeze wasn't a positive one. It makes sense is what I'm getting at. I've been on this job a long time, Derek. Trust me, cause I'm Batman. But I'm Batman now, cause I'm Batman! Getting back to the actual episode, as it turns out, there are complications with the procedure. Freeze is reverting back to his previous condition. Of course, since this was supposed to be done to Powers to fix his condition, he isn't too happy about that. So they do the rational thing, and try to kill Freeze so they can biopsy his organs.
This is the one thing we didn't want to happen.
So Lake decides to do the humane thing and... No, what are you doing? That's the wrong way with the thermostat. Damn, son. Bro's been hitting the gym to pull that off. So Freeze begins to make his escape. Screw this two-timing hag, I'm gonna get my Freeze suit. And he does. Obviously he goes after Powers and Dr. Lake, killing the latter and supposedly killing the former by freezing the two. However... Oh no. Unfortunately, with Freeze being reverted back to his previous condition, as well as, you know, attempted murder of his life, he's spiraling back to his previous tendencies. Maybe a bit more destructive considering this exchange.
There's enough energy here to destroy the whole compound, Batman. I suggest you find a way out.
Freeze, think. This can't be what you want. You'll only cause more pain, more suffering.
No. I end it. When this goes, I go too.
A path of destruction once again. Of course, Blight shows up, gets revenge, and then gets into a fight with Batman, which ends with Freeze sending Blight flying through the walls. And then we get this scene.
You gotta get out of here, Freeze. The whole place is gonna go.
Believe me, you're the only one who cares.
The building's about to collapse, and Batman tries one last time to reach out to Freeze. This is a trait of Batman that I actually admire, whether it be Batman Beyond or the original. But unfortunately, due to the nature of comics, it has become somewhat ridiculous by today's standards. The want to save people, even the bad guys. Mr. Freeze has often been considered one of Batman's most tragic and possibly one of the villains that could easily be redeemed, due to his initial motivations and tragedy. It's bittersweet to see a villain like that go out like this. But it's an episode I think hits pretty hard with the emotional feels. But wait, what happened to Blight?
We also brought these, just in case you were cold. You are idiots.
I'm glad that the show isn't afraid of cracking jokes, but at the same time will make it so the jokes don't actually interfere with the actual emotional scenes.
Batman versus Misty?
Hey kid, use the Batarang.
I got it covered. Batjet, I choose you.
Dugong, I think!
We end the episode with this.
Guess you were right about Freeze all along?
We both were.
I think what I really loved about this episode of Batman Beyond, aside from being a huge Mr. Freeze fan, it's that it presents the idea of a second chance and allows the viewer to actually think for themselves. Yes, it's a kid's show, but it still allows kids and adults even to see the perspectives of possible redemptions or second chances. You've got Terry, the younger Batman, who's willing to give Mr. Freeze the chance to prove himself to be a better person than he once was and make reparations to his victims. Then you've got Bruce, someone who has first-hand experience of Mr. Freeze's actions and is actually a victim of Freeze's crimes, and almost lost someone he cared about because of it. He believes that Freeze would return to his previous tendencies, and he isn't wrong. But unlike Bruce, we the audience see how he got to that point. Victor Freeze's body falling apart and him almost being killed by the people who thought actually cared about him. But neither Bruce or Terry see that. So from their perspective, Freeze did go back to his old ways. So it poses a question to the audience. Should we give second chances to people who seek to redeem themselves? Bruce does have the right idea at the end. It all comes down to your perspective of the matter, and the episode allows the audience to come to their own conclusions, and not be too ham-fisted about it. But what do you guys think? Should someone like Mr. Freeze have gotten a second chance at redemption, or do you think he shouldn't have? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, as well as this type of video. I'm trying something new and love to get some feedback on the matter. I'm MangaKamen, and thanks for watching. Have a happy holiday.